Hello, this is Taya,
This is Laura.
and today we are talking about The Last Airbender, the live-action movie from M. Night Shyamalan in, 2010, I think? I think it was 2010.
Are you sure it's 2010?
Nope. But I thought I remembered seeing that, so...
I know I saw it the day it came out.
Was that
And
10
I'm pretty
years ago?
sure... I can't remember if I was driving yet or not. If it was 2010, I was not driving yet, I believe. Let's see. I'm literally pulling up... Where is it? I just finished watching it.
It blacklisted you. It's like, no, you're not allowed to watch this movie anymore. Okay, so me and Laura are coming from two different perspectives on this movie. I have never seen the TV show, the cartoon. Are there books? Because it said book.
Okay, so
is it like
the series is like called, instead of season 1, it's book 1,
okay,
book 2, book 3.
But it's not based on books.
This is 2010, you were right. So it was in 2010, so 10 years ago exactly. And based on my knowledge, there are comic books. I don't know for a fact which came first, the comic books or the TV series, but there are comic books. There are comic books that go beyond series 3.
Okay, because I have only ever heard people talk about the TV show. I have never seen it. I have never seen this movie before, which was interesting because up until now we've only done Star Wars, which I had seen all of the Star Wars at least once before our recording of our podcast. So this was an interesting experience because I wasn't quite sure what I needed to be taking notes on, what my objective, what my point of view was going to be on this movie. I really came into it just had no idea what to expect because so many people hated this movie. A lot of people hated it because they were fans of the show and it was very different as far as I understand, and a lot of people just didn't like it as a movie. And so when I was watching the very beginning of this movie, first of all, it's a Nickelodeon movie, and second of all, it's a Paramount movie. So I'm kind of conflicted on that because I actually think it's not a bad Nickelodeon original movie, but I also think it's not a good Paramount movie. So it's kind of stuck in this weird limbo spot and we'll get into it, but my biggest issue with this movie is I don't think the actors are in the same movie. Like, I think there are certain actors who are in a Paramount movie, and then there are certain actors that are in a Nickelodeon movie.
Yeah.
And they just don't match up. So I think that was a lot of the issues that I had with this movie just as a movie. Obviously, I'm not coming from the show. I don't know what the differences are. I don't care what the differences are. As a movie, like Sokka, the brother, and the jerk, I don't know what his name was, but not the
Zuko? The prince?
Not the prince.
Not the prince.
So, okay.
Zhao, the commander?
Zhao. So we'll call him the commander because I won't remember these names, guys. So the commander, the prince, and the brother are in a Paramount movie. Like, they are intense and like real live characters. All of the women especially, and the waterbender guy, the man that lives in the waterbender,
the master that teaches.
The master that teaches.
I can't remember his name right now, but yes,
he is also there. Like, they are in a serious legit movie, whereas the women of this, the sister, the princess, and the grandma, like, not in the same movie. They are in a Nickelodeon original movie up there with, like, Spectacular and stuff like that.
What about the Avatar? Which one is he in?
Him, the father, the uncle, all were flip-flopping back and forth because I feel like that kid did as good as a kid could really do in a kid movie, but then there were times when they were forcing him to not be in a kid movie. And so I feel like they flip-flopped a lot. And I kind of think the commander flip-flopped a little too. He got cheesy at some points, but... So that's what I felt like. It's like, these actors are not in the same movie, and it was very obvious. So, going from that, the very first thing is the cinematography of the opening, where they're each doing, an element, and they do different moves to make different elements. You know, like each person's doing a different type of sort of martial arts in order to make an element do something. The cinematography of that was not even Nickelodeon movie. Like, it was like Nickelodeon TV show, or like it was not a blockbuster movie.
I will say they took the opening of the series and just did it live action. That is because it's a Nickelodeon TV show.
It's not a bad opening. I thought it was a cool idea. It was executed poorly because of the cinematography of it.
But they didn't change anything from the TV show. It was literally just, let's just use live action people for the TV show. They kind of switched up what characters were doing what bending. Because, well, maybe not the earthbending. In the opening for the show, before, you know, every episode, I think it is, you do see Aang. It's Aang, not Ong, in the show.
That's good, because Ong is a horrible name. Like, it sounds like you can't say gong, and
also
I just kept thinking, like, I heard a gong every time someone said his name, like the dung, like that's what I heard, and I felt like they named him after that sound, and it was annoying.
Yeah, no, it's Aang in the series. It's also Sokka in the series, not Sokka. Sokka. Avatar, not Avatar. Iroh, not Iroh.
Okay, I was looking at, because I watched it with closed caption, and his name Iroh, I feel like I've heard that, like, because I have a lot of nerdy friends and they love that show and they talk about it, and like I've never heard of, and they call him like Eero, which is spelt differently. Like, Eero's a name, but it's not spelt like that.
Yeah, no, his name is Iroh in the show.
Eero is spelt like hero,
yeah,
with an I, sometimes with an I, sometimes with an E. So I was confused about that.
No, it's definitely Iroh. He's better in the show. I mean, I'm going to say that probably about most of the movie. It was better in the show. But anyway, so back to the opening. I'm pretty sure we do see Aang do air. I also believe we see Katara do water. As far as earth and fire, I think we see one of the past avatars. I just watched the movie, dang it. One of the past avatars do fire, and then earth, I have no idea who that guy is that does earth. I think he's a character later in that you see in season 2 or 3, but anyway, but what they did is obviously they just took characters that we would know and see in the movie and did it for the opening of this. But yeah, it was basically a shot for shot, just live action of the opening.
Okay, so my next point was, so whatever her name is, the sister, Katara, she narrates it.
So much narration.
But okay, this movie had so much of it. Like, when we talk about Star Wars having an issue with show versus tell, oh my gosh, did this movie have an issue with show versus tell? Like,
I'm showing her my note where I say telling rather than showing, like right there,
like constantly. And the stupid thing is that they tell you 5 times.
Yes,
over and over again, and it's like, this is. I know that this is meant to not be like the first episode. This is meant to be an entire season, right? Like,
the whole first season.
The whole first season is crammed into this movie, and I feel like it was obvious. Like, even if I didn't know that and I just watched this movie, I could tell, because it skips over bits of time, and it lends itself to being episodic. However, they could have done so much more in the story if they didn't say over and over again the exact same thing.
Oh my gosh.
Like, even in the narration, she's like, food was scarce. We often went hunting for food. My brother, like, was not very good at hunting for food. And it's like, okay, you couldn't come up with a better sentence than that? and then I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Maybe that's just a character thing. But no. Like,
everyone does it.
Like, we get told we get introduced to the prince like 5 different times, and I wrote down, like, because we first meet him and I'm like, okay, that guy is not in the same movie, and we get introduced to him. He talks about how he's the prince in the air, and then he takes the little avatar kid and onto the ship, and then we get another introduction to him and the fact that he doesn't have his honor. And then the jerk commander guy comes and he gives this big long speech about him, and I was like, oh, well, that big long speech should have been the introduction to the prince. Like, we should have had that scene first, then he should have come to the village. That also would have taken care of the fact of why Katara feels like this obsessive need to protect this boy that she met like half a second ago. And like why her grandmother is encouraging her to follow this kid.
To be fair, in the show, of course, because it has more time, the movie, I understand the differences between like a TV show and a movie and the time constraints. I'm just trying to explain, in the show they have more time with Aang in their village. It's not just we meet him and then like 10 minutes later all this happened. Like they have time,
right?
with
But
him.
they don't even show like that they have time with him. Like there's easy ways that take a little minute of running time in a movie to show long periods of time.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like weeks and weeks, but it was at least a few days.
Even a day.
Yeah.
Like they literally get him out of the ice, put clothes on him, and the end.
Yeah, no. No, there's definitely more time. And then also the beam of light. Oh my gosh. I just finished watching this a couple months ago and I'm trying to remember, in the show, Katara and Aang go exploring and they find an old firebending ship that's near the village that no one goes on. And from what I remember, they go on the ship and that's what sends up the beam of light. Can't remember what it was on the ship, but I don't think it was him getting out of the ice. I could be wrong. Maybe it was 2 beams of light and that kept continuing. But at one point they go exploring, they find the firebending ship, they go on it, and it was a bad idea ultimately. But see, like they had enough time to like take a day to go exploring. They do penguin study. Another thing in this movie is it takes away. This movie is like a dark interpretation of Airbender. Airbender has really thought-provoking themes. It has a lot of really heavy themes, but they balance it well in the show with these are children, so they're going to act like children. They still play, they make jokes, they pull pranks, they argue about silly things. Like it really shows the reality of how children would react. I feel like Aang is really silly in the show, and they cut out a lot of it, I'm sure, for time in the movie, but I kind of miss that balance of like these really are children in a war, but they're children.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the reasons this story doesn't lend itself to live action, because it's about war. It's a very dark theme. It's a very dark situation that they're in. There's, this dictator nation trying to take over. They're killing people. They're burning people. They're dying. Like, there's, elitists. There's, sort of a nationalist type of mentality. And, like, there's dead bodies. You know what I mean? And it's a war. And it's sort of like mixing Lord of the Rings again with like a little teeny bopper movie, and they didn't find the balance in this. And I don't know if that's necessarily the medium, because I don't really see a better way of, well, there are better choices to make, but like that is a hard thing.
Yeah.
And it's hard to have something for children that is that dark, but it's hard to have something that childish for adults, so it doesn't really lend itself well. Anyway, getting on to the narration.
So much of the narration.
So my question is nomads.
Yes.
Why is everybody called a nomad? Because a nomad is someone who doesn't have a home, and a people that don't have a home.
Yeah, so...
But they very much have homes.
Yes, so in the series, again, in the TV show, it's the Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation, Water Tribes, and the Air Nomads. The only people who were quote-unquote called nomads were the Airbenders, because Airbenders were monks. So yes, they had temples where they trained people and stuff, but
they would move around.
To my knowledge, yeah, because they're monks.
Yeah.
But Aang, of course, he never traveled around when 100 years ago, before he was in the ice and everything, because he was at the temple being raised and trained. But the whole series is him, basically all of them being nomad, but like he's very comfortable with the nomad lifestyle, more so than everyone else, because he's an air nomad. But everyone else is like the Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation, Water Tribes. Everyone has like their own thing they go into.
Yeah, she calls everybody nomads, just and I was like, that's not what nomad means. So some of the effects were really good, and I didn't really have a complaint. but they were really good for Nickelodeon original movie. And you know what I mean? Like,
well, can we talk about really quickly? So this is, I'm showing her a picture of Zuko in the show and his scar in the show. Versus...
Wait, that's the Prince dude?
That is Prince Zuko in the show. Look at his scar.
Okay, so in the movie, I was... Because I've seen that picture before.
Yes.
And it took me a very long time to figure out that he had a scar on his face. I really just thought, like... Yeah.
But there's not really a way for him to hide his scar very easily. And in the movie, his scar is barely there. It's very easily hidden with just a hood.
Yeah, well, you just have to, like... You can look at his face and not notice his scar.
Exactly.
Like, I didn't notice his scar, and I was thinking he was going to, like... I didn't realize it was the same character, honestly. But, but then I was like, he's that kid with the scar. Like, that was my thought process.
Because it's so minimal.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be, he literally got burned.
It does actually, when you get a shot of it, it does actually follow the same line as that. It is his entire eye, and it does go all the way back to his ear.
But it's so subtle.
But it is not colored. Like, the color of his skin is not changed. He's not discolored or anything. And it's not rough. Because, like, his scars, like, the cartoon scar is not rough either. But it's discolored. And his eye was not affected in any way. Like, his eye shape is different. Yeah, so that scar was very unnoticeable.
Yeah, no, that was my next note, is Zuko's scar in film versus series. And I keep going back and forth between wanting to be objective and wanting to come from, I'm going to leave the objectiveness to Taya. I just want people to know it's not that I can't be objective or don't want to be, but Taya is the true objective voice in this. I'm coming from series. So coming from the series where Zuko, he wears it on his face. He cannot hide what was done to him. Everyone knows the story, which they did illustrate with, like, the little boy coming up and knowing the story of Prince Zuko.
Yeah.
But he can't really hide. Like, if the Zuko in the show had called someone up, they'd be like, hey, you have the scar. You can't hide it. It's very difficult to do so. And it's a constant reminder when he looks in the mirror. Even though I knew he was Zuko, I'm coming from the TV show. Honestly, looking at his face most of the film, I'd never noticed the scar.
Yeah.
Not once. Except when they, like, did a close-up on it. I was like, oh yeah, there it is.
And it is shaped correctly.
It's just...
You just have to kind of squint and tilt your head and pause it for a minute, and then you can see it.
But yeah, no. And then... I wouldn't say most of my notes, but a lot of my notes are about differences between the show and the movie, just because I knew I would know them, not you. Yeah. So I'll leave, like, movie stuff more to you and pipe in with my opinions, and then I'll explain differences.
Okay. So let's see. So very, very beginning, we're introduced to water bending by a ball of water getting lifted out of the ocean and dripping quite a ton of water consistently, yet the ball never actually gets smaller, nor does it get hollow.
It's not how it is in the show.
I don't know if that's a trick of air bending or a water bending.
No. But
yeah, the ball stays the exact same size, yet it is dripping continuously. And it is obviously, it's exposition. It's illustrating she is a water bender. She is not good at what she's doing. And then she drops the water on her brother, which kind of showed their relationship. It was not a great acting moment for either one of them. And it was very much like a kid's movie. And then one scene later, you have brother being, like, intense and serious. And if he was in a different movie, it would have been very good acting. Because he was in this movie, he looked ridiculous.
I agree with that.
Like, it was not, he was not having the same conversation with that girl. And, like, she is this, and she did very well for a little teeny bopper actress in a teeny bopper movie. Yeah. Like, she had a cute little voice. She had a very concerned look on her face.
The whole time, though. It never left. Which I was going to say I have an issue with. That's Katara. Katara is seen as the mother of the show. Most of the show, as I said, is them moving around. And for the first season and a little bit, she's the only girl, the only female. So she basically takes over the nurturing mother, making sure everyone's okay, the sticks together role. So she she has a concerned look and concerned tone, a lot of it, but she's also a child and she has other facial expressions. So I feel like they got someone who looks concerned really well, but kind of forgot that there are other expressions that a person would have.
I feel like the main problem with that, and how I would fix it if this was my script, is the fact that she, even though she's the narrator, which means this story is being told from her perspective, midway, not even midway, like we get to probably a third of the movie and she is totally obsolete and does nothing. And when she started talking again, like narrating again, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot, this is her story. Like it was jarring that she was talking again, because it shifted from being from her perspective to being between the Avatar and the prince. Like they were the two perspectives that we were following. Yeah. And she did not have a voice in either one of their stories. And so that was a problem. If you're going to keep somebody, especially in narration, telling the story, like if she narrated the beginning, like the roll of words, that would have been fine.
Because that's what she does in the series. The series starts off with the cycle: air, water, earth, fire, and she goes through 100 years ago. You know, we had that. I don't have the opening memorized, but she narrates the opening. She talks about, and then the Fire Nation attacked. The Avatar was lost to the world. And then she talks about how she and her brother find him, and but she doesn't narrate any of the series. The show is just a show. It's not, she just does the opening narration. So I can see why they chose her to be the narrator, because she narrates the opening. Right. When she narrated the opening, I'm like, that makes sense, Katara. But then she keeps it during the whole movie, and I was just like, and because they have to cut out so much of what happens in the series to fit it in a movie, again, understandable. They could have made it a 2-hour movie instead of an hour 40, but anyway, 20 minutes.
They could have got a lot more story in if they had made different decisions.
100%. If they had done that, you would see how important everyone was. Her, Sokka, not Sokka, and Aang, not Ong. I don't think they mispronounced Katara, but like you see how important they are through all the episodes. They each kind of get, an episode where they shine a bit more, but they really are cohesive as a team. And I feel like you don't get a full of any of them, but I kind of miss a lot of Sokka. He's one of my favorite characters in the show, and you miss so much of Sokka in the movie. You miss seeing how he's important and why. You also miss he has like dad jokes in the show. He doesn't tell a single dad joke in this movie, and I was so disappointed. No, because
he's the serious one.
I'm so disappointed.
Because he's in a teen drama, not a tween kiddie movie.
But Katara's in a tween kiddie movie, and she doesn't crack any jokes. Like, no one cracks any jokes in this film.
Well, they're in the middle of a war, Laura.
They're still children, Taya.
Not that the Avatar knows that, but
that's another thing. They take so long to tell him in the movie. Like, they go all the way to the air temple before they even like let him know, like, oh yeah, the Fire Nation did this.
Oh, is that not how it is?
No.
I was wondering how that would work. I'm like, if he's with them for a long time, how did they not figure out who he was, and the fact that he was an airbender, and the fact that all the airbenders are dead,
and what his name was,
and they don't even know his name when they go and rescue him.
Yeah, they're like, we're coming with you, and then at the air temple, what's your name? And it takes him a while to get to the air temple in this show. Again, movie speed up time, but
yeah. So, cracking of the ice.
Sorry, one more note, really quickly. In the TV show, when the Fire Nation comes, Sokka he puts on his warrior paint and gets all geared up in his warrior outfit, and he single-handedly tries to defend the village from all the Fire Nation people. It does not go well for him. Shockingly, but in this one, he kind of just stands there, which, again, I understand for the movie, but I'm talking about the differences between the show and you miss Sokka's protectiveness for not just Katara. He's protective of everyone.
Well, and I think one thing that is made very unclear is why the Fire Nation is there. They see this beam of light, but it doesn't really explain what they're he's like, bring me all your elderly, and it's like, what? Why do they want old people?
Because the Avatar's been missing for 100 years.
Right, so they think he's an old man.
Mm-hmm.
Did not get that till about 2 scenes later.
Yeah.
And then they kind of beat me over the head with the fact, like, why are you a child? Oh, he's a child. How could he be a child? Oh, you've been, like... So they got to it. They just got to it at the wrong time. Okay, so they crack the ice while they're standing on it. And big beam of light comes out. They meet this boy and
a giant bison.
A giant bison that does absolutely nothing and seems like a very important, like it's a flying buffalo, and they literally do nothing with it.
He does a roar at the end of the movie.
He does, but we barely see him.
I know.
And then he is part of a joke of he's trying to eat me, and I don't know. And the CGI on him was about as good as the original movie.
And the Nickelodeon original movie.
This was in theaters, right?
Yes, it was. I saw it in theaters the day it came out.
See, that I think is the most shocking thing about this movie, because if I had seen this movie on TV, or if it was a Netflix original, I would be like, wow, this is good CGI for this. But the fact that it was a major motion picture, and the fact that it had a huge following, and there was a midnight showing of it, which means it has a big following, there's no excuse.
And M. Night Shyamalan, who is known for a lot of big movies.
I'm sorry, M. Night Shyamalan is a really good director, and I think so much, in 2010, let me just explain to people who don't understand, M. Night Shyamalan was huge.
Oh, absolutely.
He could do no wrong. He had hit after hit after hit after hit. He was literally telling the same story over and over with a major twist ending, and everybody was still enthralled. And then this movie came out. And everything shattered for him. Yeah. He couldn't get work for a really long time. Yeah. People lost tons of respect for him. Now he's crawling back out of it because of this movie. That is the impact that this movie had, of how bad of a reception it got. And watching it, I'm like, did he think he was doing a low budget small film? Has he never worked with children before? But that's not true, because he had kids in other movies.
I was gonna say
but they weren't the protagonists, so maybe he's just never done young children movies, and he thinks this is how young children movies in cinemas need to be. I don't know.
He wrote, produced, and directed it.
And I have such an issue with the writing of this.
I was gonna say the exact same thing. The dialogue.
Who wrote the dialogue for this? Y'all know I love dialogue. I love my dialogue. But these people have words coming out of their mouth that I cannot excuse.
Oh my gosh, I had so much they repeated information. They gave superfluous information at times when we didn't need extra information. They gave information that we didn't need at all.
Well, and they gave it 5 times, and then they gave it at the most awkward moment.
Yes.
With the moon scroll. This is a scroll we found from the secret library, and it will show us how to destroy the moon spirit.
They say that about 5 times.
I'm sorry, you've told us about the secret library 500 times. We got it. We know what you're doing with it. We know what's happening. Why are you saying... Who says that?
Commander Shao.
I just... that is not words you would string together in a sentence, especially when, from a storytelling point of view, why? And it happened, it happened continuously. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't a character's way of speaking. It wasn't a Yoda moment or something. It was literally all the characters passed around this stupid trait of repeating information continuously. And that's why I'm this was obviously made to be episodes, because you kind of have to reintroduce stuff every episode, to kind of catch people up if they missed anything. And they just kept doing it, and it's we're all watching the same movie. You don't have to repeat this. We all got the same information. It's introducing the prince 10 times, and then introducing the fact that he's an airbender 10 times, and then it just, I don't know.
Yeah, they do a lot of exposition, but they do the same exposition just multiple times.
And it's there's so many easier ways to do expedition.
Yeah.
And they would they would do a partial exposition, then they would do an entire exposition, and then they would do another partial, and then another partial, and then another partial, and it was just like, oh my gosh, I get it.
So my next note, because we talked a lot about my basically first page and a half, is some differences. At the banquet when Zuko, gets introduced by that long speech that should have been his introduction in the first place by Zhao, the commander. He says, like, he can't wear the firebender uniform. Mm-hmm. That's all he wears in the show, in the first series. That's the only thing he wears is the firebender. No one ever says he can't wear it. That's all he wears. The only outfit you see him in
that's what he wears in this, too.
Yeah, but Zhao makes a comment, like, he knows that since he is banished, he's an enemy to the Fire Nation, so why do you have him on your ship? And he cannot wear the Fire Nation Army's uniform, but we'll let him for tonight, like a child playing dress up. Like, it's a jab to him, but at no point in the show do I remember anyone telling him he couldn't wear a uniform. Now, I could be wrong. People who watch the show more often than me might be like, actually, yes, they did say it, but I don't remember anyone telling him he couldn't, because he was absolutely wore it the whole time. That's all he wore.
And there was the fact that he got introduced several times and all of it was in that speech. That guy was awful, by the way. Like, he was a very good bad guy, because I wanted to punch him in the face several times.
He is a good bad guy in the show, and he's a good bad guy in the movie. Writing aside, he's annoying, he's arrogant,
and
he's truly evil.
You definitely hate him.
Yes. My next was, the acting. And then I literally wrote facepalm, because that's what I was doing.
But at what point is that? Because
the whole movie.
I'm like, I don't know where you're at. I don't know if my note comes first or after, because that was literally the whole thing.
It was the whole thing. I just decided to put the note right there, because I thought it might get better as we got in, and it didn't pick up. So I was just like, okay, we'll just put that there. My next one is when they go to the Earthbenders' village, prison place. Do you have notes before that?
Mine is right before that.
Okay, go for it.
Which is probably where you got the acting note. So the three people are traveling. This child apparently didn't look like a child, but is running through the forest, comes and hides behind like the group of people.
Sokka, Katara, and Aang.
Yeah, hides behind them and totally trusts them, even though they are clearly not of where he is from. They're not
Kingdom.
Yeah, they're not Earth Kingdom. They're not wearing the same colors. They don't look anything like him. Yeah, he comes and hides behind them, like they're gonna protect him. And like after that, there's this moment of the guards explaining why this kid is going to be arrested. He was using airbending to throw rocks.
Earthbending.
Mm-hmm. And it really hurt.
Oh, that's probably, I think that is actually where I got that.
Oh my gosh. That is a level of cheesy child original made for TV movie that is so bad. It is so bad. Whoever wrote that, whoever acted that, whoever let that not be on the editing floor is so dumb. Like, that should not have made it into a movie theater.
No.
Like, oh my goodness, that was so bad. It was
that probably
so cheesy.
is where I got that. No.
And then the sister,
Katara,
she does water bending to try and help this boy, and she ends up encasing her brother in ice.
Yes.
Instead of them. And he has this moment of just like, really? And then they are arrested and they're taken into the prison. And that was a moment where they were taking the brother, who, like I said, is in a teen drama. That's where they took him, and they're like trying to force him into this kid movie, and he just doesn't know how to do it. And so when he's like, he like talked like, and he's like, I don't even remember what he said.
I think he said something like every time,
or he was just like, Katara, like, oh, and I was just like, yeah, that poor guy is not in this movie. Like, he doesn't, he is not connecting with us. And that actor is one of my favorite like Twilight Forgiven, and now this movie Forgiven. Oh my goodness, I've seen him do so, like, I have seen his acting chops, and he is amazing and does such a good job. And then in this one, he is not in the same movie. He's trying to play it way more dramatic than it needs to be, or he's doing it right and the people in his group are doing it wrong, and so yeah, it doesn't fit. But anyway, that moment was just like, okay, well, there's a glaring spot if you're trying to see what I'm illustrating here of like people in the different movies. That was it. Then they are arrested and they go to
the prison.
The prison.
Okay, so huge diversion from the show, like massive. In the show, the prison is a metal ship in the middle of the ocean, far away from the village.
Which would make sense.
Yes, because they're earthbenders. They bend earth. And they're far away from their village so that they can't see their families they get help in any way. They're in the middle of the ocean in a giant metal ship that only has like metal and fire on it. They don't get any access to dirt, rocks, nothing.
Which would make sense.
In this show, they're right outside the village from what I could see. And surrounded by, it's just a gate and then like tents and earth.
It kind of felt like that was like their village. Like there was a ton of people there.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be earthbender, because the reason they're in prison is because bending is illegal.
Yeah.
So one of the issues I have here is he's like, how much does the Fire Nation control? And they're like, not very much, just some of the smaller villages. And I'm like, why are they like this huge threat? And like everybody's afraid of them if they have control of like a couple of little villages.
Oh no, they don't. Not in the show. Like they have like Fire Nation colonies in the Earth Kingdom.
Right.
Like they have full on come in. Now Ba Sing Se, they were correct about Ba Sing Se is like the biggest city. Like things like Northern Water Tribe, when we finally get there, it's like even bigger than that in the Earth Kingdom, and that one they have not been able to take over. So that city in the Earth Kingdom is safe, but everywhere else has. Oh, I know Moshu at this point. Moshu's like the second city, but like everywhere aside from the two main cities has been, the Fire Nation has affected them.
Yeah, and I like when she's explained that, I was like, wait, what? Like I thought they were like the bad guys, like the big bad. Like everybody's talking like, how did they wipe out an entire like nation of airbender, like of air tribes or whatever, the nomads, and nobody stopped them if they're just this tiny little entity that has a couple of villages taken over,
No, they're massive. They're absolutely massive.
Yeah, so that didn't line up very well.
But
yeah, and then why is everybody so afraid of them? Because they make a point in their bajillions of exposition that people are very afraid of the Fire Nation, that their machines are very scary and everything, but then it's like, but they've only taken over a couple of villages in the Earth Kingdom and haven't touched the Water Kingdom and haven't like what?
No, and it explains in the show they did come to the Southern Water Tribe where Katara and Sokka are from. Like, and the grandma kind of explains like, we haven't had a waterbender here since Hama was taken away. Now Hama is a character that you eventually meet in the show. It's kind of cool that they threw Hama in there.
Well, I'm sure they intended to do the other two seasons.
Exactly, so that's why they would throw her in there, because she does show up, I think, season 3. I can't remember what season, because I kind of just watch them back to back. I don't, like, stop in between. But she shows up later, and they all get a chance to meet her and find out she's from the same tribe. But the Fire Nation came and took every bender from the Southern Water Tribe and either imprisoned them or killed them. That's how Katara and Sokka's mom died. Was that. So the Fire Nation came, basically stripped the Southern Water Tribe of everything. They cleared out the air nomads, and they've taken over like 98% of the Earth Kingdom. They constantly try to take over the other two cities and constantly try to take over what's left of the Water Tribes. But like they have colonies in the Earth Kingdom. Like they're massive, and they are a scary threat.
Because they feel like they started out that way, and then they like backtracked and were like, oh, they're not actually that big of a deal.
No.
like wait, be consistent here.
Also, bending works differently in the movie versus the show, and the scene that really illustrates that is when the earthbenders finally decide to rise up, and they do like this really big like karate show of martial arts thing. Like they're showing their form, it looks like, and then like a rock about the size of a loaf of bread. That is not, one earthbender could bring down like a good half of that cliff, like if they're like, good.
Even in the movie, like just in the movie, you have one airbender standing there, and he brings up an entire wall of earth to stop fire. And then you have this choreographed group of people who are doing something, and then from the side of the camera angle, you get this rock coming at one individual. And I was just like,
no.
What?
Bending works very differently. Another thing that is very different, and they mention it a lot in this movie, they really want to hammer it home. In the movie, firebenders cannot create fire out of nothing. Mm-hmm. In the show, that is all they do, is create fire out of, it just appears in their hands, their feet, wherever they want it to.
Yeah, I have that note later on, because they make it, because the uncle dude,
Iroh,
he tells the prince, like, your chi can warm you, and he literally uses his hands to warm the ice. And then when he brings fire out of nothing, people are like, oh no, he can make fire out of nothing. And it was like, wait, what? Like,
yeah, no,
like
that's in the show.
It didn't make sense in the movie itself, because literally the boy, and he heats himself up to get out of the ice twice before that.
I think what they were trying to go for is something similar in the show. So everyone can create fire out of nothing, right? Mm-hmm. That being said, not all firebenders, there are certain techniques that Iroh knows and passes down to Zuko that not other firebenders know. And it's not all the same techniques you see, obviously, in the movie. But I think that's what they were trying to get at. It was like, hey, Iroh knows like these secrets of firebending that no one else does, and he passes them on to Zuko. That's why everyone is so scared of their powers. But they didn't. I could see why they would go with, making fire out of nothing versus getting fire because of the time constraints.
Well, because it's also in X-Men.
I forgot about freaking X-Men. Dang it! Forgot about X-Men.
We already have an explanation for it. We'll just go with that one.
Dang it! I was trying to give them more credit than that. But like, I could see why they would do that, because they were trying to show Iroh really is a very powerful bender. So is Zuko, and he's passing his knowledge down, and it really does take like few seasons, the whole show, to really get the full grasp of how much Iroh knew and passed down to Zuko and everything.
Honestly, the firebenders are not impressive in this show.
In the movie, no. In the show, yes. In the movie.
Yeah, in this movie, they hardly ever use, like, even in the training montage of the prince, when he's, like, beating up all those people rather ruthlessly for a sparring match. But then at the end, the very, very end, he finally kicks fire at one guy and kicks fire at the other guy. And that is, like, this little tiny fireball, and that is it. He doesn't work with fire. Like, we never see anything really awesome working with firebending.
Yeah.
The firebending people, like, they do a kick, and, like, he kicks fire a couple of times, and that's pretty much it. There isn't any awesomeness with the Fire Nation, and so the fact that it kind of makes it seem like they're not that cool, except for they have machines.
Yeah, no, they definitely are actually showing you. So Zuko and Zhao do fight at one point. I don't think this specific scene I'm showing you is during the battle at the Water Tribe, but this is how much fire they...
Yeah, and they're totally pulling it out of nowhere.
Yes, they pull it out of nowhere, they create it. It is part of them, and look how much fire.
And they're throwing it at each other and doing a whole... Yeah,
it's not just little tiny fireballs. In fact, at one point in the show, Zuko was having trouble with his bending, and he does a little tiny fireball, and everyone's like, good job, wow. He's like, what are you talking about? That sucks. Like, what was that? Like, what am I to? Like, he goes off on a horrible, and he keeps doing it, and it's like these tiny little fireballs. He's like, what is happening? Because that's not fire bending, and everyone else is like, but you're creating fire, and he's like, that's not fire bending. So it's really funny. In the movie, it's just these tiny little fireballs, because in the show, when that happens, Zuko like has a meltdown, and
there was not consistency as to why people were afraid of
the Fire Nation.
Like, they really got that wrong, because I was very confused as to okay, everybody was totally equal and fine, and then they got machines. And then...
I mean, their machines are formidable in the show as well, but it's formidable along with their bending. It's like, they have these machines and no one else does. Plus, they're really powerful.
And I mean, honestly, like, fire is, like, the least effective element, because earth can put out fire, water can put out fire, air can put out fire. Fire can't put out earth. Fire cannot put out water. Fire cannot put out air. Like, so... technically fire is the weakest of them all. And the fact like in the movie they can't create fire, so they seem like at a very extreme disadvantage to me, and it doesn't make sense how they can take over so much. And obviously they didn't take over so much because they just took over a couple of villages, yet everybody's afraid of them.
Do you think maybe they did that in the movie because, again, they were trying to be like, this is a kids movie, we have to like cater it to kids, like, oh, it's not that scary, just scary enough.
No, I think the writers were stupid and let a line slip that they shouldn't have.
Akka and Katara are talking, Aang's telling them why he ran away, and they're doing these really awkward close-up shots of all of them throughout the entire conversation. Also, some of the information there is different from what we were told in the show, but let's focus on the close-up shots for a second.
Where they're at the Air Nation temple?
No, it was actually when they're still in the Earth Kingdom and Aang's like telling them why he ran away. I could find the scene for you in the movie if you want.
Okay. So I have a note about that, but go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to talk about how it's really weird close-up shots on their faces the entire time.
That is a technique you use when you don't have the actors in the space at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So you do Aang's
Not all.
shots, you do Katara's shots, and then you do
Sokka's
shots. You do their shots separately because they are not in the same room. That is the technique that you use. Also, it is something that is used very often in teen dramas to create intimacy with your character. What movie was he making?
He couldn't decide, so he just decided, why not all of them? What
Yeah.
movie do you want to make? Yes. But which one? Yes.
What genre?
Yes. So another thing is, in this conversation, Aang is telling them he ran away because he was scared. He was told that he could never have a family, have a life. That's not true.
I have a hard time with that. He's a monk. He was raised by monks. Monks don't have families. Monks don't get married.
Well, okay, so two notes on that. One, avatars, we learn and see past avatars, past lives of Aang. They absolutely got married and had kids. Not all of them, but many of them, right? Also, so I actually had the same thing, like he was raised by monks. Monks don't have families, but monks are also the only airbenders, and in order to have, it's a genetic thing, you have to have an airbender ancestor or parent in order to airbend. So they do, I don't know if they were like air nomads and then like monks where like benders get trained and then they decide if they want to like go have families or stay monks and train. I don't know. I don't think the series ever tells us specifically that information, but I will say in the second series that follows Last Airbender, there is an airbending monk who was married with a family, but that's because they need to rebuild the airbending. There are not any airbenders left, so they have to have children in order to pass on the airbending so that airbenders can come back into existence. So everything that Aang in the movie was saying about like it can't have families, can't have life, blah blah blah, is completely not at all related to the reason in the show why he ran away.
Why did he run away?
He was scared to be the Avatar. He felt like it was a lot of responsibility. You see flashbacks of how he started getting treated differently by all his friends, by everyone, except like this one monk that he mentions was like basically his father.
Yeah, the one with the necklace too.
Exactly, Gyatso is his name, Gyatso. But in the show, you kind of get a bit of background. He really did. Once they found out he was the Avatar, he tried to play with his friends, and they wouldn't let him because they're like, "Well, you have an unfair advantage. You're the Avatar." And he's like, "Well, I won't, cheat or whatever." And they're like, "We can't guarantee. Like, you're just more powerful. Like, you can't play with us." And the other monks, aside from Gyatso, would always try to force so much training, and they didn't let him be a child.
Mm.
And so he ran away because he was being stifled, and he felt, he just felt overburdened by the responsibility and the thought of having to be the person to save the world at such a young age, because he's only like 11 or 12. So that's why there was never any mention of I can't have a family, blah blah blah. That's all movie crap.
That didn't make sense to me at all, because I was like, he's like, "You told me I couldn't have a family," and I'm like, "You literally live in like a monastery with monks, like." What?
Yeah, that part also
like it didn't make sense to me, and yeah, that I never really got his full reasoning behind it. Like, he didn't want to accept the responsibility made sense, but
Yeah.
not having a normal life or anything, and then it's like, you've been reborn in this different ways. Anyway, so the Fire King and the Fire Jerk is what I actually wrote down.
Oh, I have one more note about that conversation. I'm so sorry. This
Go
is
for it.
the tail end of the conversation. He's like, here's the cycle: air, water, earth, fire. He has to learn the elements in that order. So water, and Sokka mentions the Northern Water Tribe. First of all, he mentions superfluous information that we don't need to know about. He's like, my father told me about the Northern Water Tribe. That's fine. They're run by a princess because, like, the king died, which is not true in the show. In the show, the king and queen are very much alive and running the Northern Water Tribe. The princess has parents in the show.
It doesn't make sense.
But why are you telling that information right then? We don't need to know that it's run by a princess right then. That's, like, such an awkward, weird place to, if you want...
Okay, but that happens so often in this movie, like, it didn't even faze me, because they info dump so often in this movie. They have, okay, so the Fire King and the commander guy have this conversation that is incredibly pointless, and it's restating everything we already know. We know that the Avatar is a kid. We know that the Avatar is gaining ground. We know that the Avatar is, like, all of this stuff. We know that the Fire Nation, we know that his son has to regain his honor. Like, everything that they say in that conversation is information we already have. And so the entire conversation, either it should have been the only conversation, or it should have come earlier, or it should just not have happened. It was very pointless. So after they're in prison, they are make this plan to go to the Northern Water Tribe with the princess. Lots of wonderful exposition there. And they're going to fly on the bison. And that's pretty much all the bison does. They're going to fly on him, and they're going to save the villages in between, which is a very poorly written speech, and I feel bad for the brother that has to say it, because it is a very poorly written speech.
The whole thing, the whole conversation, the close-up shots, Aang's talking about it, and then what Sokka says about the water, first of all, the Northern Water Tribe, and then, of course, and we'll save all the villages in between. He just got the bad end of the stick on that conversation.
Like, that was just, oh my gosh, the info dumping. And then, okay, and then it shows us nothing of that. Like, there's no musical montage of them going around rescuing stuff. And then we get this pointless conversation with the king and the commander guy restating everything, and like, are the rumors true? And like, and then we flash forward to, oh my gosh, they've been doing all of this good work. And it's like, wait, no, we saw you put up a picture of him. Literally, that's all we saw you do. Mm-hmm. Like, there should have been some sort of montage of them saving people, of him giving speeches, of him showing that he's an airbender, of him, you know, like, that would have taken 15-30 seconds of the movie, and it would have changed so much. It would have gotten a feel completely different than that stupid info dump conversation between the king and the commander that gave us all this information that we didn't need, and then barely touched on the information that we did need and didn't know, which was that he was gaining in popularity and the people were rallying. And it doesn't even actually say that. You just kind of have to read the subtext of the ridiculously pointless conversation that they have in that situation.
Yeah, so I have a couple notes as well. It's going to be out of order because I was gone for a couple minutes. So we're going to backtrack yet again to the info dump about the Northern Water Tribe that Sokka has to give in the show. And I understand why they wouldn't put it in the movie. I feel like I have to keep saying I understand, but
you don't have to understand.
In the TV show, the Northern Water Tribe is notoriously sexist. In no circumstance would, if the king and queen died, would they let the princess run everything. They are very sexist. The women do not learn water bending. If they can bend, they learn to heal. They do not ever learn to do anything other than, which is a great power. And also they cut out, Katara learns to heal through water bending. And the fact that you can even heal through water bending is completely taken out of the movie. But that's all the women are able to do. Is they can only heal. They never learn how to actually bend water or anything else. And there's a whole episode, again, not in the movie for time's sake, but in the show, there's like basically a whole episode where Katara has to contend with the waterbending master. So in the show, she literally has to fight. I mean, physically, they have a waterbending match. to convince him to show her how to fight. And that's actually not why he ends up being willing to teach her. He actually ends up being willing to teach her because her grandmother was Northern Water Tribe and migrated to the Southern Water Tribe, and he is in love with their grandma. He wanted to marry their grandma, but she thought he was so sexist. She didn't want to be part of that marriage where she wouldn't be considered equal, so she moved to the Southern tribe instead. So the second he finds out that she's, the lost love of his life's granddaughter, plus, she does have a very feisty spirit in the show, in not the movie, but in the show, it's kind of like a combination of those things. So we kind of miss storyline. I think that's where they could have made her a little bit relevant again, was give her a little bit of something to fight for, because she did have to fight for it.
Or really just do anything.
But that could have been a moment where she did something, at least at the Water Tribe.